My name is Natalie Whitmore. I'm 36 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed in stability. Not the flashy kind, not the Instagram kind, the quiet, boring, dependable version that looks like school lunches packed the night before. Mortgage payments drafted on time, and a man who knows exactly how you take your coffee because he's been making it for you for years. I'd been with Mason for 11 years, married for 8, 2 kids, a 6-year-old who asked too many questions, a 4-year-old who still mispronounced spaghetti, a house in the suburbs with a crabapple tree out front, and neighbors who waved but never asked anything personal. If you'd asked me a week ago, I would have said we were fine. Not perfect, but fine. Last Thursday night felt like every other Thursday night. The kids were finally asleep after a minor war over pajamas and an inexplicable meltdown about the wrong color cup. The dishwasher was half full, the counters sticky in that way that happens no matter how much you wipe, and the kitchen light hummed faintly above us. Mason was drying, I was washing. Soap bubbles clung to my hands as I scrubbed a plate we'd owned since before we were married, one of those mismatched ones from a set we never finished replacing. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and stopped. Normal. Then he said it. "Hey," Mason started casually, not looking at me. Random question. I glanced over my shoulder. He was focused on the plate in his hands, drying it with way more attention than necessary. "What?" I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second, long enough for my body to register something before my brain caught up. "If I confessed to cheating," he said carefully, "would you forgive me?" My hand stopped in the soapy water. The plate slipped a little, clinked against the sink, but didn't break. The sound felt loud in the sudden quiet. The refrigerator kept humming, completely unbothered by the way my entire nervous system had just gone on high alert. I waited. He still didn't look at me. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, maybe more, long enough for the question to stop sounding hypothetical and start sounding like a rehearsal. I turned off the faucet, slowly, deliberately, dried my hands on the dish towel like I needed something physical to keep me grounded. "Is this hypothetical?" I asked. Mason kept drying the same plate. The towel squeaked faintly against ceramic. "Mason," I said again, "is this hypothetical?" He didn't answer. The plate was bone dry by now. Something strange happened in that moment. My heart was pounding, but my mind went eerily calm. Like I'd stepped outside myself and was watching a scene unfold with clinical curiosity. I nodded once. "Okay," I said evenly. "I'll take that as a confession." His head snapped up. "What? No, Natalie, no. I was just—" He laughed too quickly. "I was testing you." "Testing me," I repeated. "Yeah, to see how you'd react." He finally met my eyes, and there it was. Fear. Barely contained. There's nothing. I didn't mean it like that." I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. "You decided to test me," I said, "by asking if I'd forgive you for cheating, on a Thursday, while we're doing dishes." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "I read this article," he said, "about how couples should have hypothetical conversations to strengthen their, communication." He flinched when I raised an eyebrow. "There's no one else," he added quickly. "I told you, it was just a question." I tilted my head. "Then answer it." He blinked. "Answer what?" "Is there someone else?" I asked. "Yes or no?" The color drained from his face, then rushed back, then drained again. "You've been distant," he said instead. "For months, working late, you barely talk to me anymore." "For 3 months," I said quietly. He froze. "Every Tuesday and Thursday," I continued. "Late nights at work. New gym clothes, but no real change, except how you guard your phone like it contains nuclear codes." His mouth fell open. "You've been watching me," he said, accusation creeping into his tone. "I've been married to you for 8 years," I replied. "I notice things." I reached for my phone on the counter. "What are you doing?" His voice jumped an octave. "Calling my lawyer." He laughed again, sharp and panicked. "Over a hypothetical question." "Over your inability to say yes," I said, scrolling. "It stopped being hypothetical when you went silent." I hit the contact. My thumb hovered. I wasn't calling to end my marriage in the middle of a kitchen. I was calling to understand my options, before the story got rewritten for me. He grabbed my wrist. "Wait, put that down. Let's talk about this like adults." I looked at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. "I am being an adult," I said. "Adults call lawyers when their spouse accidentally confesses to an affair." "I didn't confess to anything," he snapped. "Then answer the question," I said calmly. "Is there someone else?" 5 seconds. It felt like 5 hours. "It's complicated," he finally whispered. And there it was. I hit dial. "Natalie, please," Mason said as my phone rang. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. It's already over." "Then you won't mind me getting legal advice," I said. My lawyer picked up on the second ring. I kept my voice professional, brief, scheduled an appointment for Monday morning. When I hung up, Mason was crying. "I was scared," he said. "I didn't know how to tell you." "Scared of what?" I asked. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I walked past him and down the hallway toward the guest room, the one we sometimes called the bonus room when family visited. Behind me, the kitchen light buzzed. The sink was still full of dishes. That night, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how many lies I'd swallowed without realizing it. In the morning, my son asked why I slept in the guest room. I smiled and told him Mommy had a cold. He accepted it immediately. Kids usually do. I didn't sleep. That's the first thing I remember about that night. The way time stretched and folded in on itself while I lay on my back in the guest room, staring at a ceiling I'd painted myself 5 years earlier. A soft gray we'd agreed was calming. It felt oppressive now, too close, like it was leaning in to listen. The house made its usual noises, pipes ticking, the faint whoosh of the heater cycling on and off. Somewhere down the hall, Mason turned over in our bed, the bed we'd picked together after hours of arguing in a furniture store about firmness and warranties. I wondered how many nights he'd lain there thinking about someone else. I wondered how long I'd been the only one sleeping honestly in this marriage. At some point before dawn, I stopped trying to rest and started counting. Lies. Missed dinners. Late texts that came just a little too fast, like they'd been pre-written. I replayed conversations I'd brushed off because I didn't want to be that wife, the suspicious one, the paranoid one, the woman who ruins a perfectly good life by asking too many questions. Turns out silence ruins things just as effectively. Morning came without ceremony. The kids padded into the kitchen, all knees and tangled hair and unearned optimism. My son asked for waffles. My daughter insisted on the blue bowl and cried when I handed her the green one first. Life stubbornly went on. "Mama," my son said through a mouthful of syrup, "why were you sleeping in the guest room?" I smiled automatically, the kind of smile you learn to deploy when you don't have time to fall apart. "I had a cold," I said lightly. "Didn't want to get Daddy sick." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his waffles, already absorbed in something small and certain. Mason didn't say much that morning. He hovered, too attentive, like a man waiting to be called in for questioning. He packed lunches he'd never packed before, asked if I wanted coffee twice, kissed the top of my head like it was a habit he was trying to remember how to perform. I let him. Not because I forgave him, because I wanted to see how long the act would last. After the kids left for school, he finally spoke. "Can we talk?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I rinsed a mug, set it in the rack, wiped the counter. "About what?" I said. He exhaled, shaky. "About last night." I turned to face him fully for the first time since I'd walked out of the kitchen. "Okay," I said, "talk." He swallowed. "It was only 3 months," he said quickly, like saying it faster would make it smaller. "And it's over. It ended last week." I waited. "That's why I asked you," he continued, "about forgiving me. I was trying to figure out how to tell you without blowing everything up." "So you tested the waters," I said. He flinched. I panicked. 3 months, I repeated, while we were still sleeping in the same bed. He nodded. "While I was scheduling dentist appointments and parent-teacher meetings," I added. "I know," he whispered. "I know." I studied his face, the familiar lines, the scar on his chin from college basketball, the eyes I used to read without effort. "Who is she?" I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "Mason," I said, "her name." He rubbed his hands together, a nervous tic I hadn't seen in years. She works in marketing," he said, "at my company." Of course she did. "The one you've mentioned a few times," I said. "The one with the brilliant ideas." His eyes snapped up. "I didn't think you—" "I remember," I said evenly. "Names, patterns, compliments that don't need repeating." He closed his eyes. "Her name is Tessa." The name landed heavier than I expected, not because it mattered, but because I'd heard it before, casually, at dinner, in passing. A nothing name that had apparently been very much something. "I met her," I said, "at the Christmas party." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "She shook my hand," I continued, "told me I was lucky to have such a supportive husband." He looked like he might be sick. "It didn't mean anything," he said again, softer now. "It was stupid. I was stressed. I felt invisible." "You weren't invisible," I said. "You were just bored." "That's not fair." "Neither is lying to my face for 3 months," I replied. Silence filled the space between us. Thicker this time. He reached for me instinctively, then stopped himself, like he remembered the rules had changed. I ended it, he said. I swear. Last week, I repeated, right before you asked if I'd forgive you. Yes, because you were scared of consequences, I said. He didn't deny it. I nodded slowly. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm meeting a lawyer on Monday. I'm documenting everything. I'm not moving out of this house. And we are not telling the kids anything beyond what's necessary. His shoulders sagged. You're really doing this, he said. I'm really doing this, I confirmed. What if we go to counseling, he tried. What if I do whatever you want? I looked at him, really looked. You already did whatever you wanted, I said. Now I'm doing what I need to. That afternoon, after he left for work, I sat at the dining table with a notebook and started writing things down. Dates, times, little details I'd dismissed before. I didn't cry, not yet. This wasn't about rage. It was about clarity. And clarity, I was learning, was far more dangerous than anger. Monday came faster than it should have. I dropped the kids off at school like any other morning, kissed foreheads, reminded them about spelling tests and snack days, waved until they disappeared into the building. The parking lot buzzed with other parents doing the same small rituals, unaware that my marriage was already in triage. By the time I pulled into my lawyer's office, my hands were steady. That surprised me. The building was beige and forgettable, the kind designed to make you feel like nothing dramatic ever happened inside. My lawyer, Daniel, a friend from college, didn't waste time on pleasantries. He listened, took notes, asked questions that felt invasive but necessary. How long? Any shared accounts? Children's schedules? Any admissions in writing? When I finished, he leaned back. In our state, he said, infidelity doesn't automatically decide custody or assets, but it does matter, especially if marital funds were involved. I filed that away. Most important thing, he continued, don't move out. Whoever leaves first can be framed as abandoning the family. Stay. Be stable. Document everything. Keep communication civil for the kids. I nodded. I could do civil. I could do documentation. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly his family would mobilize. The call came Tuesday morning while I was at work. I recognized the number immediately. My mother-in-law didn't bother with hello. I cannot believe you're throwing away 8 years over one mistake. I closed my office door. Good morning to you too, I said. He's devastated, she continued. Do you understand what you're putting Mason through? I laughed softly. It surprised us both. What I'm putting him through, I asked. Marriage is about forgiveness, she snapped. My husband had affairs and I stayed. That's what real wives do. There it was. And how did that work out for you? I asked. Silence, then a sharp inhale. She hung up. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was my father-in-law. His tone was calmer, measured. The voice of a man trying to sound reasonable while standing firmly on one side. Natalie, he said, I know you're hurt. Anyone would be. But think about the kids. Think about what a divorce will do to them. I am thinking about the kids, I replied. I'm thinking about what it teaches them if I stay with someone who broke our vows and only came clean because he was afraid of getting caught. People make mistakes. And people face consequences, I said. I'm not being vindictive. I'm just not pretending this didn't happen. He sighed. He loves you, he said. I really believe that. He had a strange way of showing it for 3 months, I replied. After that, the week took on a surreal quality. Mason tried every angle. First came seduction. Wednesday night, I heard him outside the guest room door. He didn't knock. Just stood there, silhouetted in the hallway light. I miss you, he said softly. We still have something worth saving. I told him I wasn't interested and closed the door. I heard him cry in the hallway after. It didn't move me the way it once would have. Then came guilt. Handwritten letters appeared on my pillow, long ones, about our history, our kids, the life we'd built, the future he still wanted. I read them all, felt nothing but exhaustion, threw them away. Thursday night, he snapped. You're being so cold, he said, pacing the living room. Don't you even care that I'm hurting? You're hurting because you got caught, I said, not because you feel guilty. That's not fair. Neither was you sleeping with another woman while I was home with our kids. He threw a coffee mug at the wall. It shattered. Our daughter came running down the stairs, eyes wide. What happened? She asked. Mason smiled too fast. Butterfingers, he said. Daddy dropped it. I added gaslighting our children to my mental list. Friday brought a new surprise. The receptionist buzzed my office. There's a woman here asking for you, she said carefully. She says it's personal. My stomach tightened. When I stepped into the lobby, I recognized her immediately. Tessa, She stood there in a tailored blazer, hands clasped like she was waiting for a performance review. "I think we should talk," she said. "I don't," I replied. "I just want you to know it wasn't serious," she rushed on. "He loves you. I was just there." I stared at her. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "I'm trying to do the right thing." "The right thing," I said evenly, "would have been not sleeping with a married man." I turned to security. "She's harassing me." They escorted her out. The look on her face, shock mixed with embarrassment, almost made the week worth it. Almost. That night, as I added another entry to my notebook, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't just a marriage ending. This was a campaign. And Mason was no longer the only one fighting it. By the following week, I understood something I wish I hadn't learned so clearly. People don't fight fair when they're losing control. Up until then, Mason's tactics had been predictable. Pleading, guilt, bursts of anger that burned hot and fizzled fast. I could brace for those. I could document them. I could keep my voice even and my distance intact. What I wasn't prepared for was the moment he decided to involve our children. It happened on a Tuesday night. Ordinary. Quiet. Too quiet. We'd agreed, explicitly, that conversations with the kids would stay neutral. No blame. No adult details. Just reassurance and routine until we figured out the logistics. I came home from work to find our son sitting at the kitchen table, shoulders slumped, homework untouched. "Hey," I said softly, "what's going on?" He looked up at me, eyes glassy. "Daddy says you might leave," he whispered. My chest went hollow. "I might what?" I asked carefully. "He said you're really mad," my son continued, words tumbling out too fast. "And that sometimes when grown-ups are mad, they go away. Did I do something wrong?" I knelt in front of him so fast my knees hit the tile. "No," I said, gripping his small hands. "Absolutely not. You did nothing wrong. Mommy is not leaving. Ever." His lip trembled. "I'll be good," he said. "I promise." Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. Cleanly. I pulled him into my arms and held him until his breathing slowed, until the fear drained out of his small body and back into mine where it belonged. That night, after the kids were asleep, I found Mason in the living room. "We need to talk," I said. He looked up, already defensive. "About what?" "You told our son I might leave." He frowned. "I didn't say that." "You told him I was angry," I said, "and you let him fill in the blanks." I was trying to prepare him. "No," I said quietly. "You were trying to make me the villain so you could be the victim." "That's not fair." "Nothing about this has been fair," I replied, "but involving our kids crosses a line you don't get to uncross." He rubbed his face, frustration leaking through the cracks. "He asked questions," Mason said. "What was I supposed to do? Lie?" "Yes," I said flatly. "You were supposed to lie, or redirect, or say Mom and Dad are figuring things out and you're safe." He opened his mouth to argue, closed it again. "I want 50-50 custody," I said. "No games, no manipulation, equal time, equal responsibility." "That's what I want too," he said quickly. "Then understand this," I continued. "If you ever use our children as emotional leverage again, if you poison them against me even once, I will bring every documented incident to court, including this one." He went very still. "I'm not bluffing," I added. For the first time since the kitchen, I saw real calculation in his eyes. Not anger, not panic. Assessment. He nodded once. "Okay," he said quietly. I went back to the guest room and wrote everything down while it was still fresh. Time, words, exact phrasing. My hand didn't shake. The next morning, my lawyer confirmed what I already knew. "Judges take that very seriously," Daniel said. "You did the right thing by drawing a hard boundary." Boundaries. I was learning to build them quickly. The retaliation came faster than I expected. 2 days later, Daniel called me before lunch. "He's retained counsel," he said. "Aggressive one. His mother's recommendation." "What's the move?" I asked. "He filed for exclusive use of the marital home," he replied, "claiming you're creating a hostile environment by sleeping in the guest room and emotionally withdrawing." I almost laughed. "So I'm hostile because I stopped sharing a bed with a man who cheated on me." "Essentially," Daniel said. "Standard opening gambit. They're trying to establish him as the victim." "Will it work?" "Usually not," he replied, "especially if we document everything." Documentation had already become my second job. That night, after the kids went to bed, I pulled credit card statements going back 6 months. Not because I was hoping to find something, because I knew I would. Restaurants I'd never been to. Hotels and neighborhoods Mason had no reason to be in. Charges that lined up neatly with every Tuesday and Thursday late meeting. $3,000 in hotel bills alone, paid with our joint card. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I forwarded everything to Daniel. His reply came 10 minutes later. This is very helpful. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark dining room, listening to the house settle around me. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about refusing to be rewritten as the problem in a story I didn't create. And I was done being quiet. Mediation was scheduled for the following Thursday. Court ordered. Neutral ground. Supposedly designed to reduce conflict and help both parties reach a reasonable agreement without dragging everything through a public trial. That was the theory. In practice, it felt like walking into a room where everyone had already decided who the problem was, and it wasn't the man who cheated. The mediator's office sat on the third floor of a nondescript building downtown. Beige walls, fake plants, a faint smell of burnt coffee and copier toner, the kind of place where emotions were expected to be neatly folded and placed on the table like paperwork. I arrived 10 minutes early with Daniel. Mason arrived 5 minutes late. With his mother. I stopped walking. Daniel's hand tightened slightly on my arm. Is she allowed to be here? I asked quietly. She's not supposed to be, he said. But let's see how this plays out. The mediator, a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and a tired smile, looked surprised, but not alarmed, when Mason's mother introduced herself as emotional support. Against my better judgment, the mediator allowed her to stay. That decision set the tone for everything that followed. The first hour was Mason's performance. He spoke about feeling lost, about becoming invisible after the kids were born, about how the affair wasn't about sex, but about feeling seen again. I watched him carefully. The pauses were practiced, the voice cracks timed, the remorse selective. At no point did he say my name. At no point did he say I chose to cheat. It was all passive language. Things happened. Mistakes were made. Feelings got complicated. Every few minutes, his mother interjected. Natalie has always been very structured. She can be emotionally distant. Mason needs warmth. He thrives on reassurance. I kept my hands folded in my lap and my mouth shut. The second hour shifted focus. They began talking about the house, custody, support. Mason's lawyer, sharp suit, sharper tone, suggested that Mason should have primary custody for stability and exclusive use of the marital home to avoid further hostility. I almost laughed again. Daniel squeezed my knee under the table. Let it come, he murmured. So I did. When it was finally my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I opened my folder. I'd like to clarify a few things, I said calmly. With documentation. I slid copies across the table. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, a timeline of Mason's late nights, a written account of the conversation with our son, dated, time-stamped, factual. The room changed. Mason's mother went quiet. Mason's lawyer stopped tapping his pen. The mediator adjusted her glasses. These hotel charges, I continued, were paid using our joint account, over $3,000 in 3 months, while Mason was telling me he was working late. I looked directly at Mason. This wasn't a momentary lapse, it was a sustained decision. Silence. I turned to the mediator. I'm not seeking revenge, I said. I'm seeking fairness. 50-50 custody, no exclusive use of the home, no alimony, equal division of assets. Mason's lawyer cleared his throat. There's also concern, he said carefully, about the emotional environment in the home. I nodded. Yes, I said. Which is why I documented Mason telling our child I might leave. I made it clear that behavior would not continue. The mediator leaned back. Let's take a short break, she said. When we reconvened 15 minutes later, the demands had softened. Primary custody was off the table. Exclusive use of the home was withdrawn. Alimony quietly disappeared from the conversation. They proposed 50-50 custody, equal asset division. I looked at Daniel. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. One condition, I said. Everyone turned to me. The woman Mason had the affair with is never around our children, I said. Ever. No introductions, no friend, no overlap. Mason stiffened. We're not even in contact anymore, he said quickly. Then this should be easy to agree to, I replied. He hesitated, then nodded. The agreement was drafted, signed, pending finalization in 60 days. When we left the building, the air felt sharper, colder, cleaner. Daniel exhaled. That went better than expected, he said. I stared straight ahead. Better than expected, I agreed. But as I drove home, one thought looped quietly in my mind. This wasn't over. Not yet. The quiet after mediation was unsettling. No angry texts, no dramatic apologies, no late-night knocking on my door asking for one more chance. Just silence. Mason moved through the house like a guest who'd overstayed his welcome but didn't know where else to go. Polite, careful, almost respectful in a way that felt rehearsed. He packed his things into the guest room dresser, left notes about the kids' schedules on the counter, asked before using the car, even though his name was still on it. It should have felt like progress. Instead, it felt like the calm before someone tried something else. The kids adjusted faster than I did. Week on, week off custody started the following Monday. Unofficially at first, trial runs before the paperwork finalized. The first week without them was unbearable. The house echoed. The silence pressed in from all sides. I cleaned rooms that didn't need cleaning, reorganized cabinets that had been fine for years. On the third night alone, I sat on the couch and cried for exactly 10 minutes. Then I stopped. Because grief, I was learning, comes in waves, but you don't have to drown every time. Mason didn't take the adjustment well. He called more than necessary, texted questions he already knew the answers to, asked for extra swaps, just this once. Each request framed as concern for the kids, each one documented. Then came the narrative shift. A week later, Daniel forwarded me an email. Opposing counsel alleges your emotional distance throughout the marriage contributed to the breakdown and may be relevant to custody considerations. I stared at the screen. So this was the angle. His affair wasn't the problem. My reaction to it was. He's trying to rewrite the story, Daniel said when I called him. This is common. Paint you as cold, unavailable, push responsibility outward. Will it work? I asked. Not with the evidence we have, he replied, but it tells us he's not done fighting. That night, Mason tested the boundary again. Our daughter came home from his place unusually quiet, clingy. She crawled into my lap and wrapped her arms around my neck, like she was afraid I'd disappear. Daddy says you don't like him anymore, she murmured. I closed my eyes. When Mason dropped the kids off later, I didn't raise my voice. We talked about this, I said evenly. You don't discuss adult issues with them. I didn't, he said quickly. She asked questions. You answered them, I replied, and you framed it as rejection. That's not what I meant. It's what happened, I said. This is your warning. He looked offended, hurt. I looked done. That night, I emailed Daniel and summarized the exchange. Time-stamped. Neutral language. No emotion. His reply came back within the hour. Good. Keep doing exactly this. 2 days later, Mason's lawyer requested a modification meeting. They wanted to revisit custody terms. Daniel laughed when he read it. On what grounds? I asked. On the grounds that he's unhappy with the outcome, Daniel said, which is not a legal argument. Still, the request confirmed what my instincts already knew. Mason wasn't trying to heal. He was trying to win. And that meant I needed to stay 3 steps ahead. Not louder, not angrier, but clearer. That weekend, while the kids were with him, I toured a small 3-bedroom rental closer to their school. Nothing fancy. Clean, quiet, safe. I signed the lease on Monday. I didn't tell Mason until everything was finalized. When I did, his reaction was immediate. You're moving? He asked, voice tight. Already? I'm creating stability, I said, for the kids. That's my line, he snapped, then caught himself. I smiled faintly. No, I said, it's mine now. That night, alone in the nearly empty house, I packed the last of my things. Every box felt like a decision made consciously, without fear. The story was no longer being written to me. I was writing it myself. I thought I was prepared for anything by then. I was wrong. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was driving back from the new place. The kids would be with me that weekend. I'd just bought a small dining table, nothing special, but solid, something that felt like a beginning instead of a placeholder. Daniel didn't bother with small talk. He crossed a line, he said. My stomach tightened. Who? Mason, he corrected, and his lawyer signed off on it. I pulled over. What happened? They filed an emergency motion, Daniel said, claiming you're planning to relocate the children without consent and destabilize their routine. I stared at the dashboard. I moved 15 minutes closer to their school, I said slowly. I sent the address. I sent the lease. You approved it. I know, Daniel said. That's why this is a dirty trick. Apparently, Mason was now arguing that my move was impulsive, emotionally driven. Evidence, he claimed, that I was acting out of anger rather than reason. I laughed once. It sounded hollow. So sleeping in the guest room makes me hostile, I said. And securing housing near their school makes me unstable. Welcome to family court narratives, Daniel replied. The truth matters, but framing matters too. The hearing was set for Friday morning. 2 days. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of losing, but because I was furious. Not loud fury, focused fury. By Thursday evening, Daniel and I had our response ready. Emails, approvals, school distance maps, the signed lease, a timeline showing that I'd waited until mediation concluded before making any moves. Clean, organized, boring. Judges like boring. Friday morning, we sat in a small courtroom that felt more like an office conference room than a place where lives were quietly rearranged. Mason sat across from me, hands folded, eyes downcast. His lawyer whispered in his ear like a stage director. When it was their turn, Mason's attorney painted a careful picture. A wife acting out, a mother driven by resentment, a woman who might disappear with the children out of spite. When Daniel stood, he didn't raise his voice. He laid out the facts. Approved relocation, closer proximity to school, documented cooperation, consistent communication. He ended with one sentence. This is not a mother's acting impulsively. This is a mother acting responsibly in the face of repeated attempts to manipulate the narrative. The judge didn't look impressed. The motion was denied, firmly. As we walked out, Mason tried to catch my eye. I didn't give it to him. Outside the courthouse, Daniel exhaled. That was sloppy, he said. Judges don't like being used. No, I replied, they don't. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. That weekend, my son came home quieter than usual. Again. I sat with him on his bed, the new room still smelling faintly of fresh paint. Do you want to tell me what's on your mind? I asked gently. He hesitated. Daddy says the judge doesn't like you, he whispered. I closed my eyes. There it was. Not overt, not blatant, just enough to plant fear. I held his face in my hands. Listen to me, I said softly. Judges don't like or dislike parents. They look at facts, and the facts are that both your parents love you very much. He nodded, not fully convinced, but calmer. That night, I sent Daniel another email. Subject, child statements, potential coaching. His reply came 10 minutes later. Keep notes. Do not confront him directly. This pattern matters. Patterns. Mason had stopped pleading. He'd stopped apologizing. Now he was testing how much damage he could do quietly, through implication, through suggestion, through the one place he knew I'd never strike back recklessly. Our children. I sat at the kitchen table after they went to bed, lights off, laptop glowing. I added another entry. Date. Exact wording. Context. This wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. Because if Mason wanted to turn this into a war of stories, he was about to learn something important. I don't exaggerate. I document. And documentation wins. The shift happened quietly. No shouting, no courtroom drama. Just a subtle change in posture, on Mason's side, on his lawyer's side, even in the tone of Daniel's emails. It started with money, not the kind you argue about at the kitchen table, the kind that leaves records. Daniel called me on a Monday morning. I want you to pull every statement you can, he said. Checking, savings, credit cards, past year. I already sent 6 months, I replied. I know, he said. Now I want 12. I did it that night, sitting at the small desk in my new place while the kids slept down the hall. The glow from the screen painted everything blue and unforgiving. Patterns emerged fast once I stopped looking emotionally and started looking structurally. Every Tuesday, every Thursday, restaurants I'd never heard of, hotels within a 10-mile radius of Mason's office. Then something new. A charge from a boutique furniture store, another from a jewelry shop, not extravagant, but not subtle either. Dates aligned with nights he'd told me he was too slammed to talk. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This hadn't just been an affair. It had been a lifestyle, funded by our marriage. I flagged everything and sent it to Daniel with a single line. Found more. Pattern consistent. His response came an hour later. This changes leverage. The following week, Mason's tone shifted. He stopped pushing for modifications, stopped requesting small adjustments, stopped acting like the wronged party. Instead, he went quiet. Too quiet. Then his lawyer emailed. We are open to revisiting asset division to expedite resolution. Daniel read it twice. They're backing off, he said, which means they've realized what we have. What happens now, I asked. Now, he said, we decide how clean we want this ending to be. I thought about that. I could push, expose everything. Drag the affair into open court with receipts and timestamps and numbers that told a story Mason couldn't rewrite. Or I could do something else. Something calmer, something final. I want 50-50, I said. Clean. No alimony, no games, and one addition. Daniel waited. If he violates the condition about the kids, I continued, we go straight back to court. No mediation, no warnings. Daniel nodded slowly. That's reasonable, he said, and enforceable. The counterproposal went out that afternoon. They accepted within 24 hours. That's when I knew. People only surrender that fast when the alternative scares them. Mason called me that night. First non-logistical call in weeks. I don't want this to get ugly, he said. I leaned back against the counter and closed my eyes. It already did, I replied. I'm just choosing how it ends. There was a pause. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because I was done translating intentions into excuses. Final paperwork was scheduled for the end of the month. As I hung up, I glanced at the notebook on the table, thick now, full of dates and words and facts. I realized something then. The power hadn't come from confrontation. It had come from clarity. And clarity doesn't need an audience. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. No dramatic courtroom scene, no speeches, no final confrontation where anyone said the perfect thing at the perfect time. Just signatures, initials, a clerk who didn't look up, and the quiet thud of a file being closed. 11 years of my life reduced to paperwork. It felt strangely efficient, almost disrespectful in its simplicity. I signed last. The pen felt heavier than it should have. When it was done, Daniel shook my hand. One of the smoother cases I've had, he said, all things considered. That's not comforting, I replied. He smiled anyway. It's a compliment. Outside, the air was sharp and bright. I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment longer than necessary, letting the reality settle into my bones. It was over. The logistics moved quickly after that. The house sold faster than expected. The market was decent, and we walked away with enough for each of us to put a down payment on something smaller. Mason moved into an apartment across town. I settled fully into the rental near the kids' school, the one that already felt more like home than the old place ever had. Custody followed the plan. Week on, week off. The kids adjusted faster than I'd dared to hope. They missed whichever parent they weren't with, but they stopped asking the same anxious questions. The routine gave them something solid to stand on. We all started family therapy. My idea, not Mason's. To his credit, he agreed. The sessions were awkward at first. Careful sentences, a lot of staring at the carpet. But slowly, the tension eased. The kids learned words for feelings they'd only known as knots in their stomachs. I learned how much I'd been carrying without realizing it. Mason learned. Some things. Not enough to undo the damage, but enough to stop actively making it worse. His family backed off eventually. His mother still made comments during kid exchanges, small, sharp ones meant to test whether I'd flinch. I didn't. They became background noise. His father surprised me. At our daughter's birthday party, he pulled me aside. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I was wrong to defend what he did. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just thanked him. The biggest surprise came 3 weeks later. Daniel texted me a single line. You might find this interesting. Attached was a link. The headline was bland. Corporate. Easy to miss. Mason's former department had been audited after a competitor flagged similarities in a recent campaign. Turns out those brilliant ideas weren't so original after all. Entire sections had been lifted almost word for word. The fallout was swift. Mason wasn't fired for the affair. He was fired for plagiarism. I didn't feel triumphant when I read it. Just validated. Later that night, Mason called. I let it go to voicemail. He texted instead. I didn't know, I swear. She told me they were her ideas. I didn't reply. Some lessons arrived too late to matter. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Work stayed steady. Sleep came back in fragments. Trust became something I was rebuilding with myself first. Dating wasn't on my radar. I was learning who I was without constantly managing someone else's reality. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about the woman I'd been before the dishes, before the question, before the silence. I felt tenderness for her. She didn't know what was coming. She also didn't know how strong she'd be. The text came a week after everything was finalized. It wasn't about the kids. It wasn't about schedules or drop-offs or forgotten backpacks. That alone made it feel heavier than anything else he'd sent in months. I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know I'm sorry, not because I got caught, because I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. You were a good wife. I just didn't appreciate it until I destroyed everything. I read it once, then again. Then I set my phone down on the counter and walked away. Not out of anger, not out of spite. I just didn't have anything to add. Some conversations are meant to end without a reply. Daniel framed a copy of the final decree and hung it on the wall behind his desk. One of my cleanest outcomes, he said the next time I saw him. You stayed calm when most people would have lost it. Or maybe I was just too tired to explode, I said. He smiled. That too. Life continued. The kids laughed more easily. The knots in their shoulders loosened. Our new place filled slowly, with fingerprints on the walls, mismatched furniture, and the kind of quiet that felt earned instead of hollow. Mason stayed present. Not warm, not hostile, just there. We spoke when we needed to. We didn't when we didn't. That balance took work. Some nights, sleep still came in pieces. Trust didn't snap back into place overnight. I had moments, standing at the sink, folding laundry, where a memory from the old life surfaced without warning. A laugh, a shared look, a version of us that had once felt permanent. The feeling passed, not with bitterness, with acceptance. I don't hate him. I thought I might. I thought hate would be easier, sharper, more satisfying. But hate takes energy, and I'd spent enough of mine on a story that wasn't true anymore. He made choices. I made boundaries. We both live with the outcome. That night in the kitchen, the dishes, the hum of the refrigerator, the question he thought was hypothetical, feels distant now. Like it happened to someone else. Some other woman standing at a sink, unaware that her life was already pivoting away from the person beside her. I don't think about him much anymore. When I do, it's brief, a flicker, then gone. Not revenge, not forgiveness. Just done. Done feels like freedom. Not the loud kind. Not the cinematic kind, where someone walks away in slow motion with a perfect song playing in the background. The quiet kind. The kind that looks like knowing you don't need to explain yourself anymore. I used to think closure came from answers, from apologies, from understanding why someone did what they did. It doesn't. Closure comes from deciding you're done asking. There are things I'll never know for sure. When it really started, how long I was the only one telling the truth, whether he would have ever told me if I hadn't asked that question at the sink. Those questions don't haunt me the way they once did, because the answer wouldn't change what happened. What changed my life wasn't the affair. It was the moment I stopped negotiating with reality. The moment I realized that silence can be louder than a confession, and that calm can be more dangerous than anger. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I didn't try to win him back. I documented, I listened, I chose myself without needing permission. And that choice reshaped everything. If you're listening to this and something feels off in your life, if a question keeps circling in your head and you're afraid of what the answer might be, this is what I learned. Clarity doesn't ask you to be brave. It just asks you to be honest. And once you have it, pretending becomes impossible. You don't have to burn your life down. You don't have to hate anyone. You don't even have to be sure about the future. You just have to stop lying to yourself about the present. I didn't leave in a storm. I left in a moment of stillness. And that stillness saved me. Done isn't bitter. Done isn't cold. Done is what happens when you finally choose peace over potential. And honestly, done feels like freedom.